photographs and the pictures and the videos that come from there. And you hear the screams of people screaming as the Israeli government burned men, women, and children alive. They burned them alive. And the world stands by while 15,000 children are being slaughtered. 35,000 men and women and children. And it's unbelievable, the genocide that's happening. A child with no head, and the Israeli government say it's a mistake. I hope that Benjamin Netanyahu burns in hell the same way them children and their families burned. I hope him and his generals and the far-right government in Israel, that when their God finally brings him to the resting place, that he deserves to burn in hell. Because what is happening now, not alone is it apartheid, not alone is it atrocity and a war crime, it's just horrific. It's just horrific what they're doing. Where is their soul? Where is the soul of the Israeli people that allows their government to do this to children? Where is their humanity? The Israeli people, the Jewish people, after everything the Jewish people have suffered down over the decades, that they would allow their government to do this to other human beings. Human beings. But in the eyes of Netanyahu and this far-right Israeli government, Palestinians are human beings. But today here, the Irish people say, we recognize Palestine. We recognize that they are human beings, just like every one of us. Shame on Israel. Shame on what they've done, and will never be forgotten.
Purposes. I explained many times before. If I'm gonna think about the people in my family, you guys know a lot. Like my niece, for example. My niece. I posted a video of me training my niece in Muay Thai on Twitter. You guys seen her. Literally the joy of my life. If there was a hostile foreign government that did to my niece what I have seen done to these Palestinian children, sign me up to Hamas or whoever the fuck is down to do whatever. Like, just the thought. I'm like, imagine my niece, imagine my younger cousins, my brother, he has a son. Like, imagine these people getting just bombed. And then they're like, oops, sorry, we bombed the family. Nigga, I will sign up to Hamas the next day. What are you talking about? You want to condemn them? I'll be like, nigga, Hamas is too moderate from what I want to do. Imagine if you had, because I have an older mother. I have a lot of seniors in my family. Imagine if your mother, your aunt, your grandmother was forcibly evicted from their home at gunpoint. You tell me you as a man wouldn't be down to join Hamas? What kind of man are you if you wouldn't be down to join Hamas after that? And what kind of man will you be if you wouldn't want to defend your community against these terrorists? I just got two examples. I can show you guys thousands of these. And the reason why do I not only refuse to condemn Hamas, I root unapologetically for Hamas and Hezbollah and Ansarullah because they're fighting monsters. The same way I would root for the Red Army against the Nazis. The same way you root for anyone fighting the Nazis. Listen to this video and tell me why you would condemn anyone fighting this guy. So, what's popping? My friends, my family, we are back. I hope you guys had a great weekend, had a few days off for streaming. But welcome back to Nick at Noon, RBN Live. We have a powerful show for you guys today. And this is from my interview with Danny Hython. You guys know, putting on banger after banger after banger. We have another banger guest scheduled to appear at the top of the hour, David Decamp from antiwar.com, who I read their sourcing a lot. Great anti-imperialist media. And if you watch this live stream I did with Danny, you will see I played this video and this guy in the IDF go on to explain how many children he kills. There's all these videos. Like if you're one of the people who mostly watch live streams but you stay offline, there's so many of these videos of the IDF and the terrorist scum in Israel just openly bragging about how many children they kill, openly bragging about their violations of human rights against the Palestinians, because as you guys saw from that base Irish politician, because Ireland stands for Palestine. In fact, the majority of the world population does. It's just the United States that's behind. When they explain how Israelis, they don't see Palestinians as humans, that goes to the Biden administration as well. Because we have whistleblowers, including Jewish ones. I think her name Lily Greenberg Call, who explains, and others. It wasn't just her. There was someone who worked for USAID who also explained how the Biden administration didn't even view them as humans. Now, this is the difference between RBN and the old Bernie. I wouldn't even say old because they still going around. They still strong. You still see Nina Turner condemn Hamas. You see all these like Pramil Jayapal call for the destruction of Hamas. All the people that are considered good on this issue by the establishment, they all condemn Hamas. They all want to distance themselves from Hamas. That is not what we do at this channel. It does not serve my interest. It does not serve your interest. Knowing my audience, it does not serve your interest to allow the establishment to put anti-colonial struggle as a red line, to say you're not allowed to do this. They're trying to put armed resistance off the table as legitimate actions that people can do against a criminal government who doesn't follow international law. I will argue our states like this, but when you have a genocidal state like Israel who don't care about international law, don't view Palestinians as human, and I hope like many of my friends on the left can understand the strategy and what I'm doing. Well, I am invoking toxic masculinity, which I have some of growing up in the Midwest. You know what I mean? Well, I'm looking at all the right wingers who say, give me liberty, give me death, who condemn Hamas, and I call them out as the frauds that they are. So guys, let me cook. Let me cook on this, because I'm literally revoking the manhood, the man card of all these people who condemn Hamas. So if you condemn Hamas, what are you saying? That you allowed all these crimes to be waged against you and your people and you wouldn't do anything? Isn't it the right wing who pretend that the left is weak? That the weak, there's no masculinity in the left? If you are on the right and this is like a dominant like thought, even the people on the right who are critical of Israel, they condemn anti-colonial resistance. They say they're fucking terrorists. The same people that say give me liberty, give me death will condemn people who are going against the most evil state we've ever seen. If you don't think Palestinians have the right for armed resistance, you are essentially saying no one does. So in what the professional managerial class does, they have solidarity with the corpses of Palestinians, but they don't have solidarity with their victories. They don't have solidarity with their rockets. That's why they condemn October 7th. Because when the Palestinian resistance is too successful, it's problematic. When anti-colonial resistance is too successful, it's problematic. But when we die, oh, come on, free Palestine, from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, when they see dead Palestinians. But then you see this, and this is why we're about to celebrate today, fam. Because what a lot of people in the Palestinian movement, what they don't do is they refuse to celebrate the victories of the resistance. It makes them uncomfortable. It alienates them from their social circle. But if you support the Palestinian people, we praise their success, their resistance. If we despise Israel and we acknowledge them as the genocidal Nazis that they are, wouldn't we praise military victories against them? That's why people who are following the conflict of October of the Israel-Palestine conflict, we don't have this pearl clutching over October 7th. I like the way Danny Haiphong lays it out. It was essentially a prison break. And now the Israeli government, their economy, you have thousands and thousands of people who are fleeing Israel. You have a problem where the Israeli military there's not enough people to promote to high-ranking military positions. You have mass desertions. Israel is in absolute shambles. They're in absolute shambles right now. But people in the Palestinian resistance, according to the pacifist left, the PMC left, we're not allowed to celebrate this because that's supporting terrorism, that's supporting violence resistance. Meanwhile, we are seeing international law fail. We are seeing international law fail across the board. We had the ICJ that demanded Israel not to enter Rafah. They enter Rafah immediately. You have the international community that is demanding that Israel lifts their blockade of aid on Palestinians. And now you have, I saw this headline from the website that David Decamp monitors that show that 3,500 children are at risk of starvation. You have this banger of a headline here. Democrats surprised to learn bombs are used to bomb people. This is famously jabbing at Elizabeth Warren, burning all these progressive motherfuckers who, after giving Israel the AOK, after voting to send a bomb, after giving the AOK to kill Palestinian people, now they're like, oh my God, I can't believe Israel is doing this. And now, the ICC, you have all these institutions that are trying to hold Israel accountable. And they are not able to, because the concept of international law only works if there are good faith actors on both sides. Israel despised the concept of international law. They are ran by fascists in the Likud party. And to be honest, not only Likud, there's a very prominent ideology in Israel, which a lot of people are afraid to talk about. The ideology of Jewish supremacy that runs wild among the Ben Gvir types, the Netanyahus and the Likud party. They legitimately believe as an ideology that they are God's chosen people, which means they can do whatever they want to any non-Jew, especially a non-Jew that quote unquote threatens the Israeli state, that threatens the colonial project. So it's because of this ideology of Jewish supremacy where they reject the concept of international law. How dare you, godless peasants? You unchosen peasants try to hold the law against us? Don't you know we're God's chosen people? And people are like, oh, you're not supposed to talk about this. Is their ideology. You guys know only 2% of Israeli Jews feel like Israel bombed too much. A lot of them hate the government because they didn't bomb enough Palestinians. This is an ideology that must be discussed. Because when you acknowledge this, you acknowledge that international law will never work. You acknowledge that everything they told you about Hamas was actually true of Israel, their idea of Jewish supremacy. Why do you guys think they have rabbis, that's the chief rabbi in the IDF, literally condone rape? I know you guys seen this headline, but it's one of the receipts I always share when I say it, because it's one of the things that's unbelievable. I don't know how good this website is. Let me try this source, because you guys know I don't expect you guys to believe everything I just say, right? Rape comment controversies return to haunt IDF chief rabbi. It just haunts them. Of course it should haunt him. And this is crazy, but there's a reason why he climbed the society. He climbed the society because he doesn't believe in anything uniquely evil. This is what they believe in the society. It's not rape when we do it to Palestinians. It's not rape when we do it to non-Jews, because Jews are the God's chosen people. And guys, this is why it's very important to talk about this, because there's a limit to international law. When it comes to violent, lying, settler colonial scumbags, pacifism is not the answer. International law has failed the Palestinians. You want to know who's been successful resisting the genocide of Israel? You know who's been successful in terms of weakening the Zionist entity? Hezbollah, Ansar Allah in Yemen, Hamas. They have been way more useful for the Palestinians and weakening the settler colonial project that may have slowed down them killing Palestinians. The nail in the Israeli economy, Ansarullah forcing a ton of Israeli military attention in the north, Hamas forcing IDF attention away from slaughtering children. This probably saved countless Palestinians. So as international law continues to fail the Palestinians, who's actually doing something for them? The people who engage in armed resistance, the people who are actually hurting the Israeli economy, the people who are actually punching the IDF in the nose. That's why they want to put it off the table. And now you have these fires that are spreading all over northern Israel, all these Israelis being displaced. Something that has not been discussed in the Western media is that there is a mass odious from the settler colonial project. You have Israelis fleeing in mass, going to their secondary home. All these Europeans going back home. They're tired of cosplaying as Middle Eastern now because shit is getting real. So what Hezbollah and what Ansarullah and what these resistance fires and Hamas is doing, they're literally depopulating the settler colonial project. These people are never coming back. You have mass desertions in the IDF not being covered by the Western media. These things are being covered by Israeli media when they talk about how the military falling apart. You have Ben Gvir and a few other Netanyahu advisors and people in his cabinet that's threatening to destabilize and shut down and overthrow the government because of Netanyahu's failure, because of ceasefire. So you have the government that is in shambles. They're fighting amongst each other. The economy is in shambles. You have mass desertion of the settler colonial project by the Zionists. We're seeing the end of the settler colonial project known as Israel. And it's coming about because of the resistance. Everything that was set in motion came because of Hamas. Oh man, I'm 20 minutes in. Let me send. I think that's a good way to end my comments there. I could write on that all day. Wait, I have this headline up on. Let me get my thoughts together. You guys see, this is from antiwar.com. We're gonna have Decamp. He's scheduled to join us at the top of the hour. We're gonna talk about this as well. But you guys see here, look at this headline. Gaza media office says 3,500 Palestinian children at risk of starving to death. The greatest evil we have seen. The greatest evil we have seen. So much so that I literally look at people side-eye when they say stuff like, "Oh, I think we think Israel does." No, Israel does not deserve the right to exist. This is why I'm a supporter of the one-state solution, one state where everyone have equal rights under the law, because under such a system, it will create the harmony between the Arabs, between Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people that existed in the Middle East for centuries. Remember, the anti-Semitism scourge started and escalated in Europe. Jews live safely in harmony with their Arab brothers and sisters across the Middle East. The anti-Semitism scourge was caused by white people, and they pushed it on, and they passed the blame onto Arabs, and they managed to trick the entirety of America, the UK, France, and others into thinking that Arabs are anti-Semitic when the height of anti-Semitism came from Europe and white people. So you can have a one-state solution which follows the guidelines, follow how Middle Easterns live forever. Because the idea that you can't do that because Jews wouldn't be safe is unfounded. Jews are unsafe in Europe. The Holocaust happened in Europe, not in Palestine. And now I'm going to show you guys a segment before our guest gets here that's going to get Ali Veshi fired. I am convinced that this segment is about to get this man fired. I will watch this segment, my jaw on the floor, but not for the usual reason. Now, trust me, Ali, don't get me wrong. Ali Veshi does a lot in this segment that annoys me. And I'm going to let you guys know what it is as we watch it. But this segment, I was utterly shocked to see on MSNBC. And this motherfucker may be fired, just like Mehdi Hassan for this. Where he brings on Lily Greenberg Call. Remember, I covered Lily during my hotspot videos while explaining the Jewish, the first high-profile Jewish official resigned from the Biden administration, and she explained how the Biden administration didn't see Palestinians as people. She explained how the Biden administration was literally cooking the books. They was cooking the books in order to lie about Israel letting aid in, a scandal that just shook the foundations of our society. One of the greatest, most evil acts I've ever seen. Biden lying about UNRWA, Biden lying about aid getting in, and you have, it was so evil where Biden's own team is blowing the whistle on him. So I'm gonna let this video play. I'm gonna have a lot to say on this because Ali Vesci brings on Lily Greenberg Hall, the person who's been blowing the whistle in the Biden administration. And once again, my jaw was on the floor listening to this. I would be surprised if he has a job in a month. Once again, he didn't. Not everything is gravy. Not everything is good, but it is still a damning segment for Biden and Israel and for the Democratic Party as a whole. So let's get into it.
Few international conflicts in recent memory have triggered social and political cleavages in American society, putting our liberal values and our capacity for tolerance to the test. These formative periods shaped their respective generations, giving rise to their own forms of McCarthyism, protest movements, and political dissent. Among them were the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the War on Terror, and now Gaza. This week, 2 more U.S. officials resigned over the Gaza war, accusing the Biden administration of not being transparent about the Israeli obstruction of humanitarian aid to the.
So Ali Vesci had Trump derangement syndrome, and you're going to hear it throughout the course of this segment. But doesn't Biden cooking the books and lying about aid and starving children, as we have 3,500 children set to starve? Isn't that one of the greatest scandals we've seen? Am I overreacting, fam? I'm asking you guys legit for legit criticism. Am I overreacting when I say Biden cutting aid to UNRWA using torture-obtained confessions is one of the most evil things that someone in any administration has done in my lifetime? Biden cooking the books and lying, claiming that Israel is allowing aid to come in when it is not coming in, meaning the Biden administration teaming up with Israel and helping them starve Palestinian children. Am I being over dramatic when I say that's one of the most evil things I've ever heard in my life? And trust me, I heard a lot, my friends. Dying of starvation is literally one of the worst ways to die, and there are literally 3,500 Palestinian children that are set to meet that fate. I have literally seen babies that look like skeletons unwittingly on Twitter because the babies that died of malnutrition. This is what Jim Crow Joe is doing. But throughout the course of this segment, you're going to still see the Trump derangement syndrome out of Ali Vesci. These same people who will even speak about this will then say, oh, we still got to vote for Biden. Nothing Trump has done will ever touch this evil. Anyway, let's continue.
The more than 2 million starving Palestinians trapped inside the tiny strip. That brings the total number of American officials that have publicly resigned to 9, one of whom was a member of the U.S. Air Force who set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington as he shouted, "Free Palestine."
Bro,
according to one of
he's done. He's done, bro. I would be shocked if Ali Vesci has a job. This is the first time. You guys know I watch way too much corporate media because of what I do. I have literally never seen anyone in corporate media mention Aaron Bushnell. Like, there's a gag order in the media about this. This out all the countless segments I watch. This is the first time I've ever seen him mention the guy. And this is showing the fascism, the authoritarianism of the Biden administration, where you have not only your staff resigning, you got soldiers lighting themselves on fire. And despite what the Zionists said, they said, oh, people are going to forget about him. He was nationally honored in Yemen. He got streets named after him in the Arab War. No one forgot who this man was. You have soldiers that are lining themselves on fire, and despite that, Biden still won't change course. And do not forget, Aaron Bushnell did light himself on fire just because he was sad about Palestinians being murdered. He did this because the Biden administration ordered the Air Force to help with Israeli targeting. Aaron Bushnell was about to be sent to Israel to help assist the genocide. And that is what the Biden administration is forcing people in the Air Force and the military to do right now. to assist the genocide in Gaza. So he self-immolated because he refused to follow orders. He refused to follow the order to be complicit with genocide and decided to engage in mass disobedience in a extreme form of protest and self-immolation in order to raise awareness about what the criminals in our government is forcing United States soldiers to do. Because if Aaron Bushnell didn't do this, if he declined the orders, he would get dishonorably discharged, financially retaliated against, and ruined by the military-industrial complex for the rest of his life. And that if they don't Pat Tillman his ass. And well, let's continue. Like this is shocking to see him mentioned on MSNBC. And it also shows that establishment didn't forget this guy, and they won't forget this guy. They just can't mention him. The legend of Aaron Bushnell, ladies and gentlemen.
Of humanitarian aid to the more than 2 million starving Palestinians trapped inside the tiny strip. That brings the total number of American officials that have publicly resigned to 9, one of whom was a member of the U.S. Air Force who set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington as he shouted, "Free Palestine." And according to one of our next guests, at least 24 more officials have left the Biden administration quietly. On Tuesday, Stacey Gilbert, a senior State Department official from the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, resigned in protest of a May report delivered to Congress that concluded that Israel is not blocking humanitarian aid deliveries to the Gaza Strip. I spoke with her on TV last night. She accused the Biden administration of twisting the facts for political reasons and said she is convinced that Israel is violating international humanitarian law. Gilbert is a 20-year veteran of the State Department. She resigned after concluding that it was futile to continue working on Gaza from within the government. Also resigning on Tuesday was Alexander Smith, a contractor for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID for short. Smith stepped down after his internal presentation on maternal and child mortality among Palestinians was abruptly canceled. In the days before it was canceled, Smith was told to make several redactions, including removing a slide referring to international humanitarian law and deleting any language suggesting recognition of a Palestinian state.
Meanwhile, there are still morons that are pretending and saying stuff like, what can Biden do? Come on, man, Biden can't control Netanyahu. What can he do? What can the U.S. really do to stop Israel? Meanwhile, they are literally blocking reports that will show that Israel's committed a genocide. And I'm going to bring my guest, Dave, in here soon, and we're going to continue this segment. But the Biden administration keeps saying they keep saying there's no evidence that Israel's committing a war crime. And then people in their own staff try to put a report together that shows evidence, and they get fired. Literally the most evil shit I've ever seen in administration. It's literally crazy. And liberals are still pretending that Biden has nothing to do with this. But we're going to continue this segment, but I want to take this time to introduce our guest. Amazing journalist. You have amazing site at antiwar.com. I follow your work. A lot of great anti-imperialists reporting, exposing the lies of the US empire. Thank you for joining us on RBN Live, Dave Decamp.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you. I'm a big fan of your work.
All right, I appreciate that. Same here. And I don't know how much of you was watching, but before we continue, because I would love to get your response. I'm running a little bit behind, but I think I would love to get your responses to this segment as well. But before we get started, I want to get your thoughts on what you've heard thus far, the Biden administration helping Israel block aid, and overall, just general, how the Biden administration have been complicit with Israel, just to get started as we continue the segment. Once again, thank you for joining us again, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, the clip, I saw the part of it there about, they have the State Department recently put out this report that claimed Israel wasn't blocking aid and wasn't violating international law, or actually what it said, which is even worse, is that Israel is probably violating international law, but we can't, we don't have the proof, so I guess we could just keep sending them weapons. They needed that report to continue selling them, giving them weapons and bombs and stuff to continue to drop on Gaza. And we've seen this internal dissent, especially from within USAID, because they know, there's been leaks that they know for a fact that Israel is blocking aid shipments. There's no disputing that, especially since they captured the Rafah border crossing on May 7th. And that was an operation that Biden gave Netanyahu the green light for. Since then, barely any aid has been entering Gaza. And also, you look at what the U.S. has been doing. How can they claim Israel's not blocking aid when they had to build a pier, supposedly to bring more aid in off the coast of Gaza? It's been a complete disaster, and they're dropping aid from the sky, which is killing people, which is some like 21 Palestinians have been killed during those airdrops. Either they were actually hit by the pallet or they drowned while trying to swim to get it. I mean, this is like you can't imagine like a dystopian, like science fiction story about something so horrific, like this big empire doing all these things, and the aid drops kill the people that they're supposedly trying to help. But anyway, so just on the face of it, we know that they're lying, and it's become very obvious now that you've had all these officials resigning and say that they are lying. And even Samantha Power, who runs U.S. aid, has said that she's basically said that Israel is the chief impediment to aid entering Gaza, which of course is very obvious to anybody who's been paying attention. But she's, the top, that's a high level position that she has. And she's supposedly an expert on genocide, yet she remains part of this administration that's supporting one.
And now you have Israel that is planning to put UNRWA and designate them as a terrorist organization. I was reading about this earlier today and getting mass condemnation about the international community, but the United States don't care. In fact, it was the Biden administration, Biden himself, who said he saw evidence that UNRWA was connected to October 7th that was later revealed to be completely false. You had Israel that used torture to obtain confessions and their intelligence dossier and lied about it. And despite this lie, Biden said, I saw the evidence with my eyes in order to justify the defunding of UNRWA. And I maintain to this day, for all the people with Trump derangement syndrome, we are post-duopoly here, that's one of the most evil things any administration has done, knowing that there's a famine, a mass famine being committed against Palestinian people, and then you cut aid with UNRWA using lies. It's completely absurd. And the Biden administration constantly using diplomatic immunity. And I'll pass to you, David, and I want you to speak on this. I want you to rebuke the lie before we get back to the segment where people say, oh, well, there's nothing that Biden can do. Biden and Netanyahu are beefing with each other. Speak on people who make this claim that Biden is completely helpless when it comes to holding Israel accountable. And then we get back to the segment. I'm interested in you chiming on that as well. But before that, you want to take that on?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what happened after Israel killed those World Central Kitchen workers back in April, I believe it was about 7 people from Western countries. Israel's been killing aid workers the whole time, but that got a lot more attention because they killed a few guys from the UK and the US, I believe Australia and Poland. And Biden came out and said Israel has to open more aid, border crossings to aid. And Israel did it. And they did it in a very limited way. It seemed like they were playing shell games and kind of lying about when they actually opened it. And not much aid gets through those border crossings, but it goes to show that if Biden wants something out of Israel, he can get it. And that's because the U.S. is giving, they rely on the U.S. for 70% of their weapons and intelligence support and all that stuff. So Biden has the ability to pick up the phone and tell Netanyahu to stop, or, he can completely cut them off. Now, at the same time, there is, certainly things being factored into Netanyahu's calculations right now is the fact that, 7 months away from the November election. And now we're going to have Trump and the Republicans are basically running on, a super pro-Israel platform claiming that Biden's abandoned Israel. So that's certainly factored into his calculations now, because we saw Biden say when Israel launched its invasion of Rafah, he said, he basically drew a fake red line that it's clear wasn't a real red line because of they've escalated so much now in Rafah and he hasn't done anything. But he was threatening to cut off these heavy bomb shipments. But at the same time, you saw even U.S. and Israeli officials were saying, well, IDF has enough bombs for now to bomb Rafah, so it doesn't really make a difference. So, but it is, he certainly has the power to do something here. And it looks like, he came out on Friday with his big ceasefire proposal, but Israel basically just essentially said that they reject it.
Yeah. And that was very humiliating for the Biden administration. And then they made a big PR push about this ceasefire in Israel. No, we don't agree with this at all. And what was even more shameful about it was the Biden administration was trying to paint Hamas as the ones who wasn't accepting it as they were selling it. But I want to get back to this segment because we explained how horrific the Biden administration has been. Ali Veshi here, whose days are numbered. At this segment really shocks me, Dave. I would do a lot of these Oppo research on corporate media so I can report here. I watched a lot. I have never seen a segment where they talk about Aaron Bushnell, for example. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen them talk about Lily Greenberg Call, the Jewish official who resigned. And not only did they talk about both, they brought her on the show. And so I want to show this a little bit. You can respond, you can react as well. But I want to show you guys I want to show the audience this insane clip of Ali Veshi literally breaking. This is the first time a lot of liberal viewers are going to get this information. I'm going to say this, but let's continue this. And feel free, and Dave, if you want to chime in on anything, feel free to interrupt. I won't get mad. But if you have anything you want to chime in on, but let's continue this, and then we got a few other topics that we can quickly cover as well.
Smith says after his presentation was canceled, he faced the ultimatum
I'll go back
of resignation.
Just so you guys have context for people who are joining a little bit late. I'll go back about 30 seconds.
Also resigning on Tuesday was Alexander Smith, a contractor for the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID for short. Smith stepped down after his internal presentation on maternal and child mortality among Palestinians was abruptly canceled. In the days before it was canceled, Smith was told to make several redactions, including removing a slide referring to international humanitarian law and deleting any language suggesting recognition of a Palestinian state. Smith says after his presentation was canceled, he faced the ultimatum of resignation or dismissal, and he chose to speak out. In his resignation letter to the agency's head, Samantha Power, Smith expressed frustration with USAID's treatment of Palestinians, writing, quote, "I cannot do my job in an environment in which specific people cannot be acknowledged as fully human, or where gender and human rights principles apply to some, but not to others, depending on their race." And
I was told the Trump administration was the racist administration, Dave.
Yeah, well, this is a really incredible story because he got forced out. And from what I read, he had a good record, positive reviews of his performance working for USAID over the years. And he was forced out because he put together a presentation on the mortality rate of mothers and children in Gaza, a presentation on women and children dying in Gaza. And it, this wasn't going out publicly. This was just a internal USAID conference, and he got forced out for that. So, I mean, it goes to show that even internally, they don't want any sort of attention on these atrocities that the U.S., that they're enabling and funding, essentially.
Yeah. So what Alexander Smith, he committed the gravest sin. He would have produced evidence that would have made Biden and Anthony Blinken complicit with genocide. So I explained this in my hotspot videos, guys. The Biden administration is not dumb. They know exactly what they're doing. You had South Africa in the ICC that said the United States is next. So when Anthony Blinken, Lloyd Austin, all these fucking swamp monsters come out and say, "Oh, there's no evidence of Israel committing war crimes," they have to say that, because if they don't, they directly made themselves complicit. So they had this employee that was like, "Hey man, I got this presentation that would prove that you're guilty of genocide." They looked at him like, "Get out." There's no way they would let him print that in hindsight. Any last thoughts, Dave, before we continue?
Yeah, well, I mean, the presentation, again, like he was commissioned to, he was kind of told to put this together. And that the big thing here is like, he wasn't even outright saying, that you're complicit in genocide. He was just putting together a presentation on the mortality rate of Palestinian women and children. I guess that implies that these U.S. officials are complicit in genocide, but just for doing that, he gets fired from his job. He was, basically given the choice between being fired and resigning.
Yeah. And I want to get to at least the part where they get to Lily Greenberg Call, and I'm going to let her explain what she's seeing in the Biden administration. We're also going to quickly touch on Biden escalating World War III, sending weapons to Russia. And you guys see the main title of the video with Scott Ritter, the Biden administration limiting his freedom of movement because of it, he uses large platform to expose the lies of the Biden administration. So that's what we have coming up next. We're getting a little bit more in this video. Dave, feel free to interrupt anytime if you have a thought or anything. I want to show my audience what Lily said herself. I want to at least get that far before we move on. So let's continue.
I cannot do my job in an environment in which specific people cannot be acknowledged as fully human, or where gender and human rights principles apply to some, but not to others, depending on their race, end quote. Two other Biden administration officials who resigned since the war in Gaza began are Lily Greenberg Call and Josh Paul, and they join me today. Greenberg Call, appointed by President Biden to the U.S. Interior Department, cited the president's endorsement of genocide. Paul resigned 10 days after Hamas launched its October 7th attack, becoming the first publicly known resignation. He cited Washington's blind support for Israel. Lily Greenberg Call and Josh Paul both join me now. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Lily, let me start with you, because if anybody wants to hear it in your words, you've written this out. You've appeared it numerous times in the media, but you've written out in an op-ed why you came to the conclusion you came to. Tell me why you did.
So as an American Jew, I come from communities that are impacted by this war. And I felt that, the president is really using the language of Jewish safety in particular to justify a genocide of Palestinians.
No shit. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that to her. I'm glad she's saying this. But the amount of Americans who don't acknowledge this is wild. Mm-hmm. Like this anti-Semitism psyop that we have seen, where all these Jewish people pretending that they are unsafe. We have a Catholic that's saying that they're bombing Christians and Muslims in the Holy Land in order to protect Jewish people. Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add, Dave, before we move on?
Yeah, I really like the resignation letter that she wrote, because that was one of the things that she pointed to, was Biden saying, "Oh, if not for Israel, there wouldn't be a safe Jew in the world or something." And it's like, well, what about all the Jews in the U.S.? Like, it's just a completely absurd talking point. And from what I know about her, she used to be kind of like a pro-Israel like advocate working in Washington, and to see her resign and say it's genocide, it's a pretty big deal, I think. And I think it goes to show the young American Jews, like, even if they were raised like to be very pro-Israel, a lot of them are, turning.
Yeah, she's very much a liberal, guys. Like, she worked on the Biden-Harris campaign. She believes in the Zionist entity. She condemns Hamas. She does the standard liberal stuff. But the reason why I think it's important to mention that is to show you guys how our government is so extreme and so evil. They're not losing the radicals and the revolutionaries. There are people who are institutionalists. They are being turned off the system. She's an institutionalist. She's a Democrat. There are people who was raised following the system, and they was 100% okay with following the system until the unhinged behavior of the Biden administration. I think that worth pointing out. Let's continue the video and move on. Feel free to chime in anytime, Dave.
Where over 35,000 people, 15,000 of them are killed.
Oh shit! I apologize.
Killed, and I could no longer serve at the pleasure of a president who is doing that. And using my community to justify that. And it doesn't make us safer, and it certainly doesn't make Palestinians safe.
But it doesn't. You are aware of the tensions and the idea that there is rising anti-Semitism. You can hold both of these thoughts in your mind.
No, there's not. There's no rise of anti-Semitism. You guys see, it's crazy that Ali Veshi did this segment, but I told you in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of shit he's going to say that's going to irritate me. You guys see how he's forced. If you're going to be on corporate media, you got to be forced to acknowledge this bullshit. Where the ADL uses pro-Palestinian rallies as evidence of anti-Semitism. I think you wanted to chime in, Dave. Anything you want to chime in on?
Yeah, I would just say that one of the funniest things about this whole anti-Semitism scare is that during the college protests during Passover, there was Passover seders at the encampments. Like, all these Jews leading like Passover seders. Like, apparently they're saying, Jews weren't safe there. You have so many, American Jews involved in the protests. Like, it's just completely out of touch with reality.
Yeah, let's continue. He's going to do a lot of stuff. He's even going to throw in some Trump derangement central shit in here, if my memory serves correct. But this is an overall good segment, but he's still a sellout. You can see it in the way he presents things. And anyway, you guys see what I mean as I continue. It
doesn't make Palestinians safe.
But it doesn't. You are aware of the tensions and the idea that there is rising anti-Semitism. You can hold both of these thoughts in your mind.
Absolutely. And there is rising anti-Semitism. I'm terrified of that. There's also rising anti-Palestinian racism and Islamophobia. And we know that those things are happening because of the continued US-backed assault on Palestinians. Jewish safety and Palestinian freedom are not oppositional to each other. And if anything, I don't want to leave my Jewishness at the door when it comes to thinking about Israel. Like it goes against all the Jewish values I was raised with, to kill people, to starve them, to make people refugees. These things are actually counter to what it means to be Jewish. And I know that, and there's plenty of other people within my community that do. According to recent polling that was released this last week, over half of American Jews support Biden's proposal to halt weapons transfers to Israel if there's an invasion of Rafah. There is an invasion of Rafah. There's been multiple strikes with U.S. weapons. That's been confirmed by multiple outlets. Israeli tanks are rolling through central Rafah. Bibi's calling Biden's bluff. And it's time for him to listen to the majority of people within the administration, the majority of the American people, and the majority of American Jews.
Josh, you left early. In the hopes that it would send a real signal, I assume, to the administration to rethink their strategy. Since then, others have left. A criticism has grown about the administration's position on Israel. Talk to me about when you do things like this, when you and Lily do the things you do, you hope for some change and you hope to see that change occur in a timely manner. Have you seen change? Are you seeing something happening now with the administration, or are you still as frustrated as you were when you left?
Well, I left because it was very clear already 10 days into this conflict that the bonds that we were providing to Israel were being used to violate international law. And this has remained...
He said 10 days in, he knew that, Dave. Mm-hmm. As the Biden administration said, we got no evidence. We're doing an investigation.
Yeah, I remember when he resigned, and this whole time, he's been pretty hardcore, speaking out against all this. And this is the what you hear from people working in the State Department in USAID is that the overwhelming consensus is like that, it is genocide and that it's horrific what Biden is supporting. And I mean, I think we might see some serious leaks come out. I'm hoping, at least, because that they have the evidence that Israel's committing war crimes. Yeah. So hopefully we see some leaks, so we could, really have the proof, even though obviously, if anybody that can watch a TV or go on social media can see proof of war crimes, but you know what I mean? Like kind of the fact that the U.S. government knows that it is supporting war crimes and abetting war crimes when it claims that it's not.
Bro, wait until the information we get once these people's financial safety is not on the line. Like, they're going to be a lot. Like, these are the most. What I mean by that, these are the bravest among the Biden administration, because they like, fuck the money, I'm out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
there are a lot of people that like got families and shit, bills and shit. They're like, I ain't getting up this job. But then after this is over, when Trump is president, you're gonna see a lot of people that are gonna be telling like all the stuff that Biden did during the genocide. I still believe we only know a fraction of it, like the fraction of how much info they hid, all the horrific stuff that they did behind the scenes. We only got a few whistleblowers, but this information gonna trickle out in mass as like throughout the history, as the years continue. I only want to hear. I'm gonna finish here for him. We're gonna move on. We don't have to watch the whole segment. I'm going to listen to a little bit more, and then we got a few more topics I want to get to. Don't want to take too much of your time, so let's continue here. And then we still have the Scott Ritter segment, which I think I'll do next because that flows into the Russian weapon segment. So that's what's up next. But let's continue the video. There's only a little bit more I want you guys to hear here.
Ever since then, a competition between the facts and the politics. And the experts within government who have resigned, some publicly, some not publicly, the experts in government who continue to push from the inside are on the side of the facts. Unfortunately, the politics have not shifted. But when I resigned, I did so in part because I could not be a part of authorizing the transfers of these arms that have killed so many thousands of innocents, but also because I felt that US support, military support, was an issue worthy of debate. And that debate has not been happening inside of government. So I felt it was important that debate has happened or happened in society. And there I'm pleased and proud to say that it has indeed, from college campuses to government, been a major topic of debate, and indeed in the international sphere as well.
Lily, let's talk about, you were a big supporter of this administration. I don't know whether you still are, but the point is you politically support them. You're a Democrat. There are some who argue that leaving
Here it is.
Hurts the administration, and that the consequence is that if it strengthens Donald Trump, that's even going to be worse for whatever.
Now, I'm sorry to torture, but this is the part I was waiting to see. You guys see, they are literally dropping bombshells to you, Ali Vecchi, about how the Biden administration is doing the most evil thing we have seen, about lying about genocide and starvation of children. And you guys see his reflex. They almost can't help it. Then maybe he didn't have this plan. Like, are you concerned that this might help Trump? I'm playing this whole part now. I want you to respond. We wrap up here. This is the part I want to make sure I want to get to. But let's play this part again. I want you to respond to it.
Still are, but the point is, you politically support them. You're a Democrat. There are some who argue that leaving hurts the administration, and that the consequence is that if it strengthens Donald Trump, that's even going to be worse for whatever it is you're concerned about. Tell me how you think this through.
I didn't hear that. Whatever you're concerned about, you just explain it to me. Fuck it.
Well, it's kind of like, I mean, I've been seeing Bernie Sanders, like he came out against Netanyahu coming to address Congress, calling him a war criminal, but I'm sure Sanders is going to be supporting Biden against Trump. So, I mean, it's just not a surprise to see that, there might be a point that Trump might be worse than Biden is right now. But the fact is, when it comes to Gaza, right now, you have Biden actively supporting this genocide of kids in Gaza. And, what could be more important than that right now? Like electoral politics, how does that even register in your brain when you're talking about things like this?
You guys see how the red blue game rots people's brain? They just giving you bombshells on your show, bro. It was up to this point where I was like, man, I can't believe Ali Vecchi is doing this. I was at this point like, bro, I can't. Then we got to this point like, oh, there it is. The lecture, like, hey, man, you this whistleblowing shit you doing here, aren't you concerned it's going to help Trump? Fuck getting the information out there. Aren't you concerned it's going to help Trump because Trump is going to be worse on whatever the fuck you're trying to accomplish? I didn't know that the first time I watched this video. I won't play that part again. Like, bro, I don't know. Let's watch it. I think that was so weird for him to say it like that.
Okay. Support them. You're a Democrat. There are some who argue that leaving hurts the administration, and that the consequence is that if it strengthens Donald Trump, that's even going to be worse for whatever it is you're concerned about. Tell me how you think this through.
I'm absolutely terrified of a Trump presidency.
I just wanted to see her response. So she says she's terrified. Yeah.
Which is why I worked on the campaign in 2020. It's why I worked for the administration. And it's why I, for months, and many others have been pushing the president to stop this disastrous policy that is not only killing thousands of Palestinians, but alienating voters here in the United States. It's alienating staff like myself who worked for the president. It's alienating young voters, people. I organized college students in Arizona in 2020. These people, turned out their peers on campus for Biden, volunteers who spent 40 hours a week.
I'm mostly keeping hands off of Lily because what she has done. But I think it's hilarious that you're like, come on, man, stop committing a genocide. You're making it hard for us to campaign for you.
Yeah.
I find it to be hilarious. I still keep my hands off her because I still like what she did. David, you want to respond? And it'd be after you respond, we play the absolute last clip and then we move on. Anything you add to that?
Well, I mean, it is something like you see all this dissent from within the Democratic Party and like the non-committed votes, the uncommitted votes and all that. And it really, I mean, Biden's just pushing through. Like it just doesn't matter. It's just you support Israel no matter what, and that's that. It's just really unbelievable. I mean, it's believable, but it's just like, I mean, it really goes to show how much control Israel has, the Israel lobby has, just over American politicians.
Yeah, and it'll be the last clip we play and we move on. But at least Lily is consistent with her Trump derangement because I find it hilarious. These liberals, that say Trump is a threat to our democracy. Trump is the greatest threat to our country, but there's one change we could do. We're not going to change our Israel policy, even though that may get that guy in trouble. But I think you want to chime in. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's good, like you mentioned before, kind of to see like a typical liberal like this, like coming out this strongly against it. Like it is a good sign that it's not just like people like us and that are really against this thing. It is like establishment liberals who are disgusted by this, but what Biden's been doing.
Yeah. So I want you guys to hear a response, then we move on. We get to the Scott Ritter story, and then I want we can discuss on Russia, Ukraine as well. And then we begin to wrap up here soon. We don't want to take too much more of your time. But I'm actually curious on hearing our answer again. So I'm actually playing in full. It'll be the last clip of this segment. So let's play.
Support them. You're a Democrat. There are some who argue that leaving hurts the administration, and that the consequence is that if it strengthens Donald Trump, that's even going to be worse for whatever it is you're concerned about. Tell me how you think this through.
I'm absolutely terrified of a Trump presidency, which is why I worked on the campaign in 2020. It's why I worked for the administration. And it's why I, for months, and many others have been pushing the president to stop this disastrous policy that is not only killing thousands of Palestinians, but alienating voters here in the United States. It's alienating staff like myself who worked for the president. It's alienating young voters, people. I organized college students in Arizona in 2020. These people, turned out their peers on campus for Biden, volunteers who spent 40 hours a week in the months leading up to the election. And so it's up to the president to prevent another Trump presidency. And he can do that if he actually enforces this deal and stops sending weapons to Israel.
Well, let's talk about that. First of all,
and this is the only thing
deal.
we differ on. And once again, I'm not dissing Lily or anything, but Biden lost that vote forever. You guys see how their messages, Biden, you can still turn this around. No, Biden led to the starvation of thousands of children. There's no turning it around.
I mean, I think, unfortunately, that there are some people who might be fooled by, like, probably not definitely not everybody who's not voting for Biden because of this, but I'm sure that there are some kind of Democrats, again, like kind of those establishment types, who could be fooled by some of these things that Biden's doing, but probably not a significant amount. Like, I think, all these leaks about how Biden is so frustrated with Netanyahu, like if only he could do something. I think that does work on some people, but probably not that many.
What are your thoughts about the shift in the tide? I want to ask you about, and this before we get to our next topic, I'll just ask you in general about how Israel PR machine failed in a way I've never seen in my lifetime. And I made the argument, and always time I get, feel free to put back you disagree, but I made the argument that Israel lost militarily and diplomatically in a way that we've never seen before. We've seen the axis of resistance hammer Israel. Northern Israel was on fire because of Hezbollah. You had Ansar Allah in Yemen that caused a massive economic disaster for Israel as well with their blockade. So what's your thoughts on this? Or do you agree with that? What's your thought about the current state of the Zionist project post October 7th and their genocide?
I mean, I think that they, like, the PR defeat that they have faced is like nothing that's ever happened before. Like, they have really lost the public relations battle and like the propaganda war. If you look at like the polls and stuff, and just, you can get the general sense that young Americans, it doesn't really matter what their political persuasion is. They are much more likely to be skeptical of this U.S.-Israel relationship than the older generations. And so I think, long term, Israel is in trouble, very in a bad situation when it comes to long-term support from the U.S. I mean, it's funny. Trump, when he was asked about, this was in one of the interviews he did, he was asked about Israel and everything, and he basically said that they're losing the PR battle. And he said something like, 17 years ago or however long ago in Congress, if you said one bad thing about Israel, that was it. That was your career was over. And now you have these Democrats, speaking against it. And he was saying it like it was a good thing that they used to not be able to speak against Israel. But so we have seen that, it's still a small number within Congress, like opposed to arming Israel, but it is growing. And we've even seen some signs of it on the Republican side. Obviously, the only person in Congress who votes against it on the Republican side is Thomas Massie. But there was just a guy, I forget his name, but he was trying to primary Texas Republican who was against aid to Israel, and he almost won. And he's a younger guy. So we might see more of that. I think it's the long term. And I'm not saying we should hope for changes in Congress right now to change this thing. Like, that's not going to happen. But I mean, in like the next few decades. So I think that's all factored into Israel's calculations right now too, why they don't want, why they want to continue this thing. They want to complete, the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And then militarily, I mean, they are in trouble if they lose support from the US, they wouldn't be able to handle a full-blown war with Hezbollah and continue what they're doing in Gaza. But the thing is that they still have the US behind them. I mean, there's been all these reports about the US worried Israel's going to escalate into a full-blown war in Lebanon. And they say, like, yeah, the U.S. is going to support them, like, either way. So, like, they have that support from the U.S.
Yeah, well said, Dave. I'm going to read a few super chats, and then we get to our next two quick stories. We'll begin wrap up maybe here soon. and after this segment. Thank you for the 50 bucks, my friend. DD Geopolitics. I think that's Sarah. We have a panel that we have planned. You guys seen the shows that I did on DD Geopolitics. Sarah was on RBN. I think it was 2 weeks ago. We're gonna have her back on very soon. Big shout out to DD Geopolitics. I love what you guys are doing. We got a powerful coalition we forming here, and also we got a roundtable that we planning. Well, Sarah gonna bring her homies on RBN. It should be fun. So big shout out to them and everyone at DD Geopolitics. Big shout out to my homie Old Crow. You guys know him, big friend of the show. I am honestly surprised by the restraint that resistance groups have maintained in order to maintain international support, because every IDF soldier who is an adult is a combatant. Well said. I agree with that as well. Thank you, Old Crow. And I made a mistake many times of underestimating the restraint by Iran, Russia, and China. And even these resistance fighters are showing a great strategy. Like the West just assume that these people, they have no strategy. They assume they're like barbarians. And this smug attitude is actually leading to the downfall of the Zionist entity. The idea that they wouldn't have Hamas destroyed, that they'd be struggling with Hamas and Hezbollah, that's not, oh, Hezbollah, that's nothing. Oh, Hamas, that's nothing. That leads to their downfall. Anyway, let's move on to another super. Feel free to chime in with anything you want, Dave, as well. Thanks for this last super chat. I'll read and I'll read some more later. Thanks for 2399, pal. Nick, great coverage. You have the duopoly, but Europe is not really better. Oh, don't get me started. Trust me, I know. The UK election, bro. Labor is like Labor's cooked. The UK cooked. Australia's cooked. Trust me, I'm seeing what's going on in Europe. Europe is in shambles, bro. Anyway, I actually want to get your thoughts on that as well. Like and this kind of leading to our European coverage, because the like pro-Europe wing in Europe is very strong. You have green parties in Germany who support NATO, left party in the UK who support NATO. So trust me, pal, I know how cooked European politics is. Anything you want to add to that, Dave?
I mean, I was gonna related to the Ukraine stuff. I mean, the European countries have just been like completely. It's like they've been completely cut loose, and they're just behind all these new escalations, sending troops and using the missiles to strike Russia. I mean, that was who really pushed for it, was like the UK and the European countries. So yeah, I mean, they're just completely out of control right now.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start, bro. Like, I have done so many coverage about how the Swedish left lost their mind and they became pro NATO. You had it was the Green Party of Wales that literally completely flipped on their NATO position. I did a hotspot video about that like a while ago, where they used to be explicitly in their charter anti-NATO, and then they quietly changed it. Like, oh, we support any efforts to repel the Russian invasion. Anyway, that we can do a whole show about that. He said, the guy said also, so I would really love to talk to you. That's the whole show. And I'm gonna do it like a show eventually about the UK election, the UK politics, how Labour and the reason why Jeremy Corbyn, he has like his own party. I'm gonna do a show talking about like what Labour did to him. Like, bro, they smeared him as an anti-Semite in one of the worst. That's when I learned about the anti-Semite side, when I saw what they did to Corbyn. Labour literally tanked the entire election and allowed Tory domination in order to stop Jeremy Corbyn. I'll pass to you for anything else you want to add before we move on. Anything else you want to add, Dave? Before
I would just say the Corbyn thing's interesting. I mean, you wonder if that would work now, because that was a few years ago when people still bought all that stuff. But I don't know if that would work at this time. Yeah, because that really did bring him down. That was it. It was the anti-Semitism smears. I mean, it's really something.
I remember Mehdi Hassan repeated that as well.
Oh, really?
I just going on it was something recent. It was like, I'll try. I gotta be careful because I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like, he bought into the Jeremy Corbyn anti-Semitic smears, and then someone for the Grey Zone destroyed him for that. But there was like a lot of these like faux pro-Palestine people who was like, yeah, man, we pro-Palestine, but we gotta be careful of the Corbynites because they're anti-Semitic. I still like this. I've been following for a long time. I remember this clearly. That's why it's so wild, Dave, to see the anti-Semitism psyop be teared down, because I saw how effectively it was used against Jeremy Corbyn. He was destroyed.
And I mean, I don't even know much about Corbyn. I didn't follow him too closely, but if just from looking into him like a little bit, you can see he's not anti-Semitic. Like, it was pro-Palestinian. I mean, it's just as simple as that.
I like Corbyn because he was one of those people who didn't condemn Palestinian resistance. As far as I know, he's one of those people that are like, yo, Israel, what they're doing to Palestinians is horrible, and Palestinian resistance is the result of Israeli colonialism. The fact that he like wouldn't outright condemn Palestinian resistance is what made the establishment really hate that motherfucker. And that's why, and it also probably helped make it easier for them to make the anti-Semitic claims. But it was wild to watch it happen. Like no matter how much, like Jeremy Corbyn would have an event with pro-Jewish groups that was anti-Zionism. He would become friends with all these Jewish groups. He would make all these statements like I'm not anti-Semitic. No matter what he did, it wouldn't go away. He would go on Sky News, BBC. He would do interviews like, I promise you guys, my criticism had nothing to do with Jewish people. It's just the Israeli project. Then the next day, you see UK media, Jeremy Corbyn's doubled down on his anti-Semitism. It was the wildest thing to see. But anyway, let's move on. Just for the sake of time. I'll get to some more super chats later. I see them. I see a few came in. I will get to them after the next segment. Big shout out to Zoya's Love, Zoya's Life. You guys know New Era. We got banger guests left and right. Tomorrow, we have Jason Smith, and we talking about China. This is fire. He's an American journalist living in China. I've seen a video of his before. Great content. I want to get your thoughts on this. And we quickly touch on this and because I think this is related to the whole Ukraine thing. Scott Ritter is a former arms inspector. We had him on RBN. I love Scott Ritter's energy, like especially as he's been covering the Israel-Palestine issue. And I don't think it's a coincidence that he's been speaking out about Ukraine since the start, like 2 years, 2.5 years, ever since the start of this conflict. Scott Ritter has been talking about this, and then Scott Ritter becomes based as hell on Israel-Palestine. Like he's playing on RBN. He literally went to some Palestine event and he apologized. He's playing this on his latest appearance on RBN. He apologized to a group of Palestinians for not being on Israel's ass enough, for buying into that. Like Scott is going so hard against these motherfuckers, and this is a side point. I don't think it's a coincidence that now they start fucking with them like this. Like now they're going after the Zionist entity as well. This is just an excuse, and it's gonna get much worse for our friend Scott, unfortunately, because you can fuck around criticizing other wars if you want. But the second you start going after Israel, bro, it's over. So I want to get your thoughts on this in general because you had Scott Ritter, who was doing an economic forum in St. Petersburg and was stopped. His passport was seized. And when he was asked what was going on, he was told it was orders by the State Department. So Dave, what's your general reaction to this before we move on?
Yeah, so that's interesting what you said. I didn't think of that, like, because I know he went to Russia. He was there pretty recently, like a few months ago. And then maybe it was before October 7th. I'm not sure. But I wonder if that's related, like how he's been speaking out against Israel. Because, you go on YouTube, Scott Ritter, if he's on a show or his show, he's getting hundreds of thousands of views. Like people really like Scott Ritter. They really like to hear what he has to say. And he has been like an unrelenting critic of the proxy war in Ukraine. So, I mean, that's clearly why he's being targeted here, I would say. And this was something I've thought about. I mean, kind of expected almost to see things like this happen when you have people, I've seen a few people go over to Russia, and I have wondered if this was like a something that they would do to try to prevent these trips, because with all the sanctions on Russia, they don't want Americans talking to Russians and spreading the idea of that the US and Russia could get along. No, Russia's, the new big bad enemy now. And, they want kind of a new Iron Curtain. So I think it's, what's that?
Look at this headline. Like I just saw this, like what?
Oh,
why
yeah. I mean,
Americans like Scott Ritter spout pro-Putin propaganda. And guys, he doesn't I wouldn't even classify him as doing this. He want peace. But sorry, Dave. I was reacting viscerally to this headline. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave. I want you to
you see headlines like that. And that reminds me of when Gonzalo Lira died.
Yeah.
The headlines from like the Daily Beast about him were just like completely disparaging his character. I think that was when he was first arrested in Ukraine. I mean, just really disgusting stuff. And that was an American in Ukraine who was jailed and then died in jail for his political thoughts, for his political speech. So here we have something similar. Scott Ritter, someone who is, again, like a relenting critic of the proxy war in Ukraine and now the situation in Gaza and all of that, and gets his passport seized. And so I saw the initial article about this from RT. That's what we put up on antiwar.com. Has there been any more? Like, has he gotten any more information, or is it still just kind of vague as far as you know?
what I learned, 'cause I have a hotspot video come out on this, is that Scott Ritter apparently wasn't the only one. One of there's like this Fox News judge guy, I don't know his name, Judge Napiano, something like that. I don't fucking know. He was also stopped too.
So I actually saw that they said that initially Sputnik, but then they issued a correction that said he wasn't.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't see the correction, so thank you for that.
But they but so it's interesting about Scott. Judge Napolitano is actually a really interesting guy. So he was a Fox News contributor for decades. Judging Freedom is his show, and we run columns from him at antiwar.com. He's like a really good on civil liberties and everything. He's another one. He was very against the Ukraine proxy war. I wondered how he would be on Gaza. Again, Fox News guy, and he has been so good, and he gets tons of views too.
I don't know much about him. That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, look at his guests. Just go on his YouTube page. You'll see all the, he has all the gray zone guys. He has a few of our guys from antiwar.com all the time. He has Scott. He has, and he does like 3 interviews a day. He does a lot of content. So that's another one. I'm sure, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm sure that they're looking at him, if he gets targeted in some way like this. But as far as I know, that was there was like a miscommunication there that Sputnik said he got his visa confiscated, but that didn't happen apparently. So, but yeah, I think that's what this is about.
Yeah, what this is so ridiculous, because I'm literally looking at these headlines now, bro. The if you interested, bro, Google Scott Ritter and look at the headlines these motherfuckers write about him, bro. The establishment hates this man's guts, bro. That's how you know he's doing good work. Like we have a great time talking to this guy on RBN. He doesn't do this bullshit where he condemn Hamas and all this. He doesn't condemn resistance. The fact he roots for them. And now look at what he says. They say here, another headline calling him a propagandist, Marine of the Russian propaganda. You have these people smearing Scott Ritter as like a Putin propagandist, but like I said earlier, he's calling for peace. Like he's not. I seen his comment. He's not like pro Russia. And how can you say he's pro Russia because he called for peace and peace in Ukraine? Is he pro Hamas because he wants Israel to end the genocide? Is he pro Xi Jinping because I saw him speak out against US putting forward China? You guys see how this neocon strategy is ridiculous. Why do they put Russia out? It's based on that logic, pro China, pro Palestine. You guys see how they focus on the Russia part of it? Anyway, it's extremely shady. The thing is, this is why it's such a big deal, because there's no travel ban from the United States to Russia, guys. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, why are you it's not even about Scott Ritter, guys. There's no travel ban from the United States to Russia. There's no arrest warrant that was put on Scott Ritter. What law did the Biden administration and the State Department use to prevent him from joining a flight? There's no law on the book on this. This was a direct violation of the First Amendment, as far as I know. And you have Russian media, bro, having a field day with this. You know how they don't show this stuff on mainstream media? I was digging to see what RT field day with this. I saw Fiorella, great report on this. Russian media field day on it. China media field day with this. Here's the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova. She called on the United States authorities to answer exactly what constitutional amendment they was guided by, for example, for not allowing Scott Ritter out of the country. And I'm asking you guys, what law on the book for that? How did they accomplish this? The overall message I'm sending is that we are governed by lawless beasts who do whatever they want. Especially the Biden administration is directly violating the rights of Americans casually. Any last response? And I'm gonna ask you, because one of the reasons why they're doing this because Scott Ritter has been calling out the United States unhinged policy on Ukraine. And isn't it weird that they don't want people to hear the Russian perspective? Right? You have Biden that gave okay. I'll pass to you guys. Actually, I do want to wrap up soon. I'm going a little bit longer than I planned, but so I'll pass. I'm gonna combine the questions here because Russia warns U.S. of fatal consequences over miscalculations in Russia. And they also have another headline. I'm trying to make this pretty quick. Let me see if I can find it. Where, this is from your site. So I'll pass you from here. The Kremlin, Western troops in Ukraine have no immunity from Russian strikes. So, and I covered this a few days ago where General Stoltenberg, some person from the fucking
NATO,
I'm blanking on his name for some reason, but he was saying he said something like, "I'm not worried about Russia escalation. We're not worried about that." As Russia is literally screaming from the hilltops. So I shut up. I'll pass to you, Dave, for your general reaction over the Western policies in Ukraine, allowing Ukraine to use United States weapons to strike into Russia, and the insane escalation that's going on right now. I'll pass to you very broadly to take that on, Dave.
Yeah, so these stories like this one that I wrote today, this warning from the Kremlin saying that Western troops, if they are sent to Ukraine, they're going to be targeted by Russian strikes. We have seen Russia, I read the Russian media, and they're constantly warning the West, the US, NATO, against letting Ukraine strike Russian territory with, Western missiles. They're constantly warning against deploying troops. And it does seem like, we don't see it much in our media. And then you see people like Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, saying, we don't have to worry about that. Throughout this whole war, they're always threatening things, warning us not to do certain things. And you see think tankers, people that work at think tanks in the US say similar things that, there's been no escalations. But if you live in Ukraine, you know that there have been escalations. Russia has significantly escalated its war in response. Specifically, one thing that always tends to do it is when Ukraine launches attacks inside Russia. In October 2022, when Ukraine first bombed the Kerch Bridge that connects Crimea to the Russian mainland, that's when Russia started doing the large-scale, missile strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. They didn't do that before then. And that's something when the U.S. invades a country, that's the first thing that they do is destroy the civilian infrastructure. That's what they did in Iraq. And then recently, Russia just launched this offensive in Kharkiv in the northeast in Ukraine from Belgorod, the Russian oblast that borders the region. Putin said that they did that because Ukraine's been attacking Belgorod for the past year. There's been a lot of over 100 civilians have been killed. A neo-Nazi militia that's led by like a known neo-Nazi guy called the Russian Volunteer Corps. There's supposedly Russian-born people fighting for Ukraine. They've launched ground raids into Russia, into Belgorod, using American armored vehicles. I mean, so that these are things that people don't realize. Like the escalations have already been crazy, and now the missile strikes. It's Russia has drawn a big red line here again, saying don't do this. And what is their response going to be? Putin has hinted that it could be some sort of strikes on NATO. I would guess, we know that there is a small number of NATO special operations troops in Ukraine. It's been kind of an open secret. This was revealed by the Discord leaks. It said there was 97 NATO special operations soldiers in Ukraine. There's also the mercenaries. So, people question if those are also secretly, like NATO troops or something. But, I wouldn't be surprised if we see, we know specifically that there's British troops in Ukraine helping them fire the Storm Shadow missiles. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Russia hit them or something, because I'm sure that they know where they are. And now you have France talking about kind of doing like a big deployment, they're planning to send like a few hundred troops. I mean, it's completely, and you see this headline
Macron
here.
lost his mind, man. I was about to ask you about that, about Macron and his actions. You have friends that had a statement that said they're gonna stop following the direction of the United States. They want Europe to become their own Europe, and people was happy about that regarding Gaza. But another context of that statement was regarding Ukraine. Like it was good regarding Israel, bad regarding Ukraine, because another reason he said it, because he was like, man, I'm tired of these fucking restrictions that the United States is putting on this, which led to Macron. He was being rebuked by a ton of European leaders in Germany and the UK. And he's still like, I don't care. We should start World War III right now by sending French military into Ukraine. So do you have anything else you want to speak on, add to that, Dave, about Macron's posture during this war. Here's the headline: any French military in Ukraine will be a legitimate target for Russian forces, Lavrov says.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine now, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, Ukraine has no chance of winning. Sending a few hundred troops to train Ukrainians inside Ukraine, I mean, what is that going to do? It just seems like a reason to escalate. Like, it seems like just a purposeful attempt to escalate this thing into like a direct war between Russia and NATO, which is just completely crazy. And Macron is kind of strange because in like the first year of this thing, he was one of the few NATO leaders of a NATO country that kept in touch with Putin. He would talk to Putin and he would say things like, "Oh, eventually we'll need a peace deal." And he even said at one time that they'll need to take into account Russia's security concerns, which got everybody mad at him. And now he's the one, for the past few months, he's been saying, "Yeah, we should send troops." And actually, what he's been talking about, this is a deployment for training that seems like it's going to happen. But what he's been talking about sounded like ground troops to fight Russians. So, he's completely out there. So, and it's like, I can't believe, sometimes I write these stories, I'm like, is this real? Like, are they really going to send these troops to Ukraine just to get killed by Russia, just so they could escalate? Like, it's just, it's really, I know like most people's attention has been on Gaza for good reason, but this is like really getting out of control.
Yeah, and there was even flowing the possibility of a draft. Like many countries in Europe talk because now they've full-fledged in the rise of Russia and China, the rise of BRICS, the failure in Ukraine. Because even though I think a lot of it was propaganda, I think maybe there was a lot of arrogance in the neocon establishment that probably believe, oh, we just send weapons to Ukraine. Of course, we're going to defeat Russia. So now that Russia is solidly winning in Ukraine, you're seeing panic. You're seeing the sanctions that the West put on Russia fail. Not only did it fail, the only thing it did would lead to de-dollarization efforts. And now you have more and more countries that are pushing this de-dollarization effort. Now you have Trump. He had a statement that's going to that only going to lead to the escalation of de-dollarization, where he said he's going to go after countries, punish and sanctions countries that go off the dollar, which will only lead to the escalation of that because people are saying that the United States is throwing sanctions around as a weapon. So my absolute last question to you, then we can be in Rabuka. We can go all day. Always great to have you on day. Always great to get your perspective. But what do you think about the de-dollarization push, which I think a lot of people say this as well, which really started because obviously there was a lot of chatter, but I think actions were taken after Russian sanctions. So what's your thoughts on that? Do you think it's real? Do you think something that Americans should be really concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely real. I think it's something like, if it continues, it would take a long time before like the US dollar is really in a position that it might lose like its position as the number one reserve currency. But it is something like, when you talk about sanctions and kind of like the hubris of the US empire, before Russia invaded Ukraine, I remember things I was covering for antiwar.com involved like all this concern that Russia and China are growing closer together. And you see that it's like a direct correlation between sanctions on Russia, sanctions on China, US and NATO military buildups in Europe, US military buildups in the Asia Pacific. They're clearly saying to China and Russia, okay, you guys are the enemies. So what is their reaction? Obviously, they're going to work closer together and increase trade. And then that really increased after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and then all the big sanctions on Russia. I mean, their trade has really gone up. And like, again, it's just so obvious. And what is the US doing right now to try to stop it? They're putting more sanctions on Chinese companies. Like, that's just going to make them trade with Russia more. If they're sanctioned by the US, then they're not going to, like, it seems like a flailing empire. And the only person I've seen, like I saw Rand Paul was talking about this. He was kind of grilling Blinken about this. The only one I've seen in Congress say like, what we're doing with China with these sanctions is stupid. Like, you're just sanctioning them thinking that what is it going to do? And if you know anything about China, they're not just going to be like, oh, okay, the US is mad at us for doing this, we're going to stop. If anything, it's going to make them just, do it more. So it just, you wondered, like, I really scratch my head sometimes with these people. Like, are they just that incompetent, or is this part of like some kind of plan? I don't know.
Yeah, well said. And make sure you guys follow antiwar.com for more coverage of these issues. Dave, once again, I'll follow your work a lot, so enjoy the issues you cover and how you guys exploit. You guys expose U.S. propaganda, I should say. One topic that I really didn't get a chance to talk about today, which I will cover later this week, I was going to talk about the new Mexican president and how AMLO, you guys know AMLO approval rating is like 80%. It's great. And he's one of the most popular leaders in the world. We're going to cover this later. I'm going to talk about more about the Mexican president. I didn't have time for it today. I'll let you guys know I'm going to cover that later this week. Let me look up the name of the guest. I think Zoya mentioned it earlier. I'm gonna have a guest to talk about China. Yeah, let me see. Jason Smith. That's tomorrow. So I still got a lot of cover. So I'm gonna end it for now. Dave, anything else you want to shout out? Any last anything else you want to plug before we begin to wrap up? I appreciate your time today, brother.
Yeah, if people, all my writing, I do news coverage for antiwar.com. You could follow me on Twitter, at Decamp Dave is my handle. And I also do like a daily YouTube show and podcast just going over the news that I cover. It's called Anti-War News. It's on YouTube, Rumble, or you can listen to the podcast.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for joining, Dave. Once again, I will pop you in the back here. Remember, tomorrow, I'm going to have Jason Smith on. Savvy and JB show this week is going to be fire. They're going to have a Molly from the Uhuru Black Socialist Movement. The Savvy and JB show is back, and they're back stronger than ever, man. I'm very excited for that. And then Friday, I'm having Dr. CBS on. We got a lot to talk about. I got so many guests to announce here. That's on Friday. Dr. CBS. We have a lot. Anyway, just stay tuned. Make sure you guys hit the bell. I'm very hyped for the Molly show on JB and Savvy. They had Garland Nixon on last week too. Very hyped. Hope you guys enjoyed this interview. I had a hotspot video coming out later. I'm pretty tired. Make sure you guys check out Dave Decamp. Here's his website, antiwar.com. If you guys notice, I use him as a source quite a bit on RBN. Great source for a leftist reporting. This is where you can find David Decamp's work. So I think that's all I have. I'm trying to think of any other announcements. I feel like I'm blanking on something. But anyway, I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll be back tomorrow around the same time. Peace out. Have a good one.